My grandson pushed me into the lake and laughed, "Don't be so dramatic," while I was drowning. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt invisible to the people who should see you most? Tell me where you're listening from, because what I'm about to share changed everything I thought I knew about family. My name is Michael Turner, and the moment my grandson pushed me into that freezing lake, laughing while I struggled to breathe, I realized something terrifying. They didn't just dismiss my pain. They expected me to apologize for it. The water hit me like a wall of knives. 1 second I stood on the wooden dock, watching the sunset paint the lake orange and gold. The next, hands slammed into my back and I was falling, arms flailing, no time to catch myself. The cold swallowed me whole. I went under immediately, my clothes dragging me down like anchors. Water rushed into my nose, my mouth. I kicked hard, broke the surface, gasping and choking. Through the water streaming down my face, I saw him. My 16-year-old grandson, standing exactly where I'd been, hands on his hips, grinning. "Grandpa, don't be so dramatic," he called out, his voice light, amused. Behind him, my son and daughter-in-law stood near the cabin. Watching. Not moving. I reached for the dock, my fingers numb, my chest burning. The laughter drifted across the water, casual and cruel. That's when I understood. No one was coming to help me. I was drowning, and they thought it was funny. I clawed my way to the shallow edge, dragging myself onto the muddy shore instead of the dock. My lungs burned. My hands shook so badly I could barely grip the rocks. Water poured from my jacket, my shoes, my hair. I lay there for a moment, coughing up lake water, my whole body trembling. When I finally stood, soaked and shivering, I expected concern. Instead, my daughter-in-law, Patricia, crossed her arms and sighed. "Michael, you're making a scene," she said, like I'd spilled wine on her carpet. My son, Thomas, wouldn't even look at me. He stared at the ground, hands shoved in his pockets. And my grandson, Kyle, he just smirked. No apology. No hint of remorse. Just that same amused expression, like he'd pulled off a harmless prank. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words stuck in my throat. My teeth chattered too hard. Patricia turned back toward the cabin. "Come inside when you're ready to calm down," she said over her shoulder. They walked away. All three of them. And I stood there, dripping and alone, understanding something I'd been too blind to see before. This wasn't an accident. This was permission. That night, after I'd changed into dry clothes and sat by the fireplace trying to stop shaking, Patricia cornered me in the kitchen. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low and controlled. I waited, thinking maybe now someone would acknowledge what happened. Instead, she leaned against the counter and said, "You embarrassed Kyle today. He was just playing around, and you turned it into this whole drama." I stared at her, stunned. "I was drowning," I said quietly. She waved a hand. "You were fine. You swam to shore. But now Kyle feels terrible because you made him look bad in front of everyone." The words didn't make sense. I almost died, and somehow I was the problem. "Thomas thinks you should apologize," she continued. "Just smooth things over so we can enjoy the rest of the weekend." Something inside me went very still. Very cold. I looked at her carefully arranged expression, the way she spoke like she was doing me a favor. "Okay," I said softly. "I'll handle it." Relief flooded her face. "Good. Thank you, Michael." But I wasn't agreeing to apologize. I was agreeing to stop explaining myself to people who refused to listen. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in the guest room, listening to the house settle around me, and replayed years of moments I'd let slide. The jokes at my expense during family dinners. The decisions made without asking my opinion. The way Patricia always redirected conversations when I spoke. The times Thomas sided with her instead of hearing me out. The expectation that I'd always understand, always adjust, always accommodate. I'd called it keeping the peace. But peace for who? Not for me. I'd been bending so long I forgot what standing straight felt like. The lake incident wasn't sudden. It was the natural result of years of teaching them I didn't matter. That my comfort, my safety, my dignity were negotiable. Kyle pushed me because no one had ever shown him I deserved respect. Thomas stayed silent because he'd learned silence kept his wife happy. And Patricia dismissed me because I'd never given her a reason to do otherwise. Lying there in the dark, I felt something shift. Not anger exactly. Something quieter, colder, more permanent. I'd spent years trying to earn their consideration. But you can't earn what people refuse to give. That night, I stopped trying. The next morning, I started paying attention differently. At breakfast, I noticed how Patricia planned the day without asking anyone's preference. How Thomas nodded along automatically. How Kyle scrolled through his phone, barely acknowledging anyone existed. And I noticed something else. The small ways I'd been holding everything together. I'd driven them to the lake house, 6 hours from home. I'd paid for the groceries filling the kitchen. I'd fixed the loose railing on the deck the day we arrived, the one Thomas kept saying he'd get to someday. I'd been doing this so long it felt invisible. Automatic. But it wasn't invisible to me anymore. After breakfast, I excused myself and walked down to the dock. The water looked calm, almost friendly in the morning light. Hard to believe it had felt like death yesterday. I stood where Kyle had stood, looking back at the cabin. From here, I could see everything clearly. The distance between where I'd been pushed and where they'd stood watching. It was far. Too far for them not to have understood I was in trouble. They saw me struggling. They chose not to help. That clarity settled into my bones like concrete. And for the first time in years, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The following week, back in my small apartment across town, Patricia called. "Michael, we need you to watch Kyle on Saturday. Thomas and I have plans." Her tone assumed agreement. It always did. I took a breath. "I can't this weekend," I said. Silence. Then, "What do you mean you can't?" "I have other commitments," I replied calmly. "What commitments?" "You're retired." The irritation in her voice was sharp and immediate. "Just personal things I need to handle," I said. She huffed. "This is really inconvenient, Michael. We've had these plans for weeks." Not once did she ask how I was doing. Not once did she mention the lake. "I'm sorry," I said, not feeling sorry at all. "You'll have to find someone else." She hung up without saying goodbye. 20 minutes later, Thomas called. "Dad, what's going on?" "Patricia said you refused to help Kyle." "I didn't refuse to help," I corrected. "I said I wasn't available." "But you're always available," he said, like it was a fact of nature. "Not this time," I said quietly. He sighed, long and frustrated. "Fine. We'll figure it out." The call ended. Neither of them asked if I was okay. Neither mentioned my recovery. And in that silence, I saw exactly how conditional their affection had always been. 2 weeks later, we met for dinner at Patricia's insistence. She wanted to reconnect as a family. I arrived on time, bringing flowers for the table like I always did. Kyle barely glanced up from his phone when I walked in. Patricia kissed my cheek automatically, already talking about her day. Thomas poured wine, his movements distracted. During dinner, Kyle told a story about swimming practice. "This kid almost drowned," he said, laughing. "Coach had to jump in and save him." So dramatic. He looked right at me when he said it. Right at me. Patricia laughed. Thomas smiled into his wine glass. And Kyle's smirk, that same amused expression from the lake, settled on his face. "Don't be so dramatic," he repeated, his tone mocking. Testing. The table went quiet for half a second. Patricia glanced at me, waiting to see how I'd react. I didn't. I cut my chicken calmly, chewed slowly, and said nothing. But inside, I filed that moment away with perfect clarity. Every word, every laugh, every person who stayed silent. Kyle thought he could keep using that phrase like a weapon. What he didn't understand yet was that I was done being a target. I just wasn't going to announce it. A few days later, I asked Thomas to meet me for coffee. Just the two of us. We sat in a quiet corner booth, and I told him plainly what had happened at the lake. Not dramatically. Just facts. Kyle pushed me into deep water. I struggled to breathe. No one helped. Thomas stared at his coffee. Dad, he's 16. He didn't mean anything by it. He laughed while I was drowning, I said. And you watched. He flinched. That's not fair. What's not fair? I asked. That I almost died, or that I'm mentioning it now? He rubbed his face. Look, I know it scared you. But Kyle's that weekend, I cleaned out my file cabinet. Old tax returns, medical records, receipts I'd saved for no particular reason. At the bottom of a drawer, I found a folder I'd forgotten about. Inside were copies of checks, bank transfers, receipts going back 15 years. Money I'd given Thomas when his business struggled. The down payment I'd helped with for their house. Kyle's private school tuition, 3 years of it. The car I'd bought Patricia when hers broke down. Summer camp fees. Emergency expenses. Thousands and thousands of dollars, quietly given, never mentioned again. I spread the papers across my kitchen table and added it up. The number made me sit down hard. Over $70,000. More than I'd realized. More than they'd ever acknowledged. I'd never asked for repayment. Never even brought it up. I'm just a kid. He doesn't understand the consequences yet. You making this into a big deal is only going to create tension. I sat back, studying my son's face. Looking for something I wasn't sure existed anymore. So you're asking me to move on, I said slowly. I'm asking you not to rock the boat, he replied. Patricia's stressed enough without family drama. There it was. The choice, made clearly. His wife's comfort mattered more than my safety. I nodded slowly. Okay, Thomas. Okay. He looked relieved. Yeah, I said. I understand now. But what I understood wasn't what he thought. I understood he would never protect me. And I needed to stop expecting him to. I wanted to help my family. But looking at these documents now, I saw something else. They'd built their comfortable life on my silent support. And they'd never once said thank you. I gathered the papers carefully and put them in a new folder. I wasn't sure yet what I'd do with them. But I wasn't going to forget they existed. Not anymore. The following Tuesday, I had a routine checkup with my doctor. I mentioned the lake incident casually, expecting him to wave it off like everyone else had. Instead, he sat forward. You inhaled water? He asked sharply. Some, I admitted. And you didn't come in right away? I shrugged. I didn't think it was serious. He ordered immediate tests. X-rays, lung function, the works. When the results came back, he showed me the images with a serious expression. You have fluid in your lungs. Early pneumonia. If this had gone untreated another week, you could have been in real trouble. The words hit me harder than the cold water had. I could have died, I said slowly. You still could if we don't treat this aggressively, he said. Michael, drowning doesn't always happen in the moment. Sometimes it happens days later, quietly, in your sleep. I drove home in silence, his words echoing in my head. I'd almost died. Not almost like I'd thought. Actually, almost. And my family had treated it like nothing. That night, I updated my will. My medical directive. My power of attorney. I removed Thomas's name from everything and replaced it with my lawyer's. If something happened to me, my son wouldn't get the chance to minimize it again. A month later, Patricia's mother hosted a large family gathering. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people I hadn't seen in years. I almost didn't go. But something told me I needed to. Patricia held court in the living room, telling stories, making everyone laugh. At some point, someone asked about our lake trip. "Oh, it was lovely," Patricia said. "Though Michael gave us all a scare." She laughed lightly. Kyle was goofing around on the dock and Michael ended up in the water. He acted like he was dying. People chuckled politely. "Don't be so dramatic, right?" she added, mimicking Kyle's voice. More laughter. I stood near the kitchen, holding a glass of water, listening to her rewrite history into something harmless. Something funny. I could have stayed quiet. Should have, by old habits. Instead, I stepped forward. "That's not quite what happened," I said calmly. The room shifted. People turned. Patricia's smile tightened. "Kyle pushed me off the dock into deep water," I continued. I inhaled water and struggled to reach shore. No one helped. Silence dropped like a stone. Patricia's aunt, Helen, frowned. "Wait, you were actually drowning?" "Yes," I said simply. "I developed pneumonia afterward. My doctor said I was lucky." Patricia's face flushed. "Michael, you're exaggerating." But Helen was already standing. "You got pneumonia from inhaling water and no one helped you?" Her voice carried shock, not amusement. The narrative cracked. Just slightly. But enough. Over the next few days, my phone stayed mostly silent. Then Patricia's cousin called. "I heard what really happened at the lake," she said. "That's awful, Michael. Are you okay?" Word was traveling. Quiet conversations happening in corners I couldn't see. Then Thomas called, his voice tight. "Dad, Patricia's upset. She says you're telling people she's a bad person." "I told them what happened," I said. "That's not the same thing." "You're making her look bad," he insisted. "She's embarrassed." "I almost died, Thomas." Silence. Then, "People are talking. It's creating problems." I understood then. I was being punished. Not for drowning. Not for getting hurt. For mentioning it. For refusing to pretend it didn't matter. "I'm not going to lie about what happened," I said quietly. "Then maybe you shouldn't come to family things for a while," he said. "Just until this blows over." My own son, uninviting me from my own family. Because the truth made his wife uncomfortable. "Okay," I said. "If that's what you want." But we both knew something had broken. Something that wouldn't heal just by waiting. I hung up and sat in the quiet of my apartment, feeling strangely light. They thought silence was punishment. They didn't realize I'd been drowning in their noise for years. I stopped answering most calls. Stopped offering to help. Stopped showing up to things I wasn't specifically invited to, which turned out to be almost everything. And something interesting happened. Their lives started unraveling in small ways. Thomas called 3 weeks later. "Dad, my car broke down. Can you help with the repair cost?" "I can't right now," I said. Silence. "What do you mean you can't?" "I have my own expenses to manage," I replied. He hung up frustrated. A week after that, Patricia called. "Michael, we need help with Kyle's tuition payment. The deadline is tomorrow." "You'll have to work it out yourselves," I said calmly. "Are you serious?" Her voice rose. "You've always helped with this." "Things change," I said. She called me selfish and hung up. But I didn't feel selfish. I felt clear. For the first time in years, I was prioritizing my own health, my own peace. The money I'd been giving them went into a savings account instead. The hours I'd spent fixing their problems went into reading, walking, living. And slowly, like testing a broken bone, I started to feel stronger. Meanwhile, they started to panic. Because the safety net they'd never acknowledged was gone. And they were finally falling. Patricia showed up at my apartment unannounced. We need to talk, she said, pushing past me into the living room. I closed the door quietly. You're being spiteful, she said, turning to face me. Withholding help because you're mad about something that happened months ago. I'm not being spiteful, I said calmly. I'm protecting myself. From what? Your own family. From being treated like I don't matter, I replied. Her face flushed. You matter, Michael. But you're acting like a child. We all move on from things. You're the only one still stuck on this. I studied her carefully. Patricia, your son pushed me into a lake and laughed while I drowned. You told me I was making a scene. No one apologized. And when I mentioned it honestly to other family members, you punished me for it. That's not how it happened, she said, but her voice wavered. That's exactly how it happened, I said. And I'm done pretending otherwise. She stood there, breathing hard. If you don't help us, there will be consequences. Like what? I asked. She hesitated. Thomas won't let you see Kyle anymore. The threat hung in the air. Okay, I said quietly. Her eyes widened. Okay. If that's the choice you're making, I said. But understand something, Patricia. I'm not the one creating distance. You are. She left without another word, the door slamming behind her. 2 weeks later, I ran into Patricia's sister at the grocery store. Michael, she said warmly. How are you? We talked briefly. Then she lowered her voice. I heard what Kyle said about you. I still went. What did he say? She looked uncomfortable. He told his friends you've been acting unstable. That you're making up stories about the lake incident because you're getting old and confused. The words landed like stones. He said that. She nodded. My daughter heard him at a party. She thought I should tell you. I thanked her and finished shopping in a daze. At home, I sat at my kitchen table and finally understood. Kyle wasn't just dismissing what happened. He was rewriting it. Turning me into the villain of his own story. And I'd stayed silent long enough to let him. That night, I made a decision. Silence hadn't protected me. It had only made me easier to erase. If they were going to tell stories about me, I was going to make sure the truth got told first. Not loudly. Not angrily. Just clearly, to people who would listen. I called Patricia's cousin Helen. The one who'd asked if I was okay. Helen, I said. I need to tell you everything that happened. And I need you to really hear me. She listened. For an hour, she listened. And when I finished, she said quietly, Michael, that's abuse. The word shocked me. But she was right. I'd been abused. And I was done protecting the people who did it. Helen told her sister. Her sister told Thomas's aunt. The truth started moving through the family like water finding cracks. And this time, it wasn't filtered through Patricia's version. It was detailed, specific, impossible to dismiss. I didn't shout it from the rooftops. I just stopped lying when people asked if I was okay. No, I'd say. I'm not. And then I'd tell them why. Some people didn't want to hear it. They changed the subject or made excuses. But others listened with growing horror. Wait, he pushed you on purpose? No one pulled you out? You got pneumonia and they didn't visit? Each question revealed how much Patricia had minimized. How much she'd twisted into something harmless. One afternoon, Thomas's uncle called me. Michael, I heard about the lake. That's unacceptable. Kyle's old enough to know better. Thank you, I said quietly. Has Thomas apologized? He asked. No, I said. He's told me to move on. His silence said everything. The family was starting to see what I'd been living with. Not all of them, but enough. And the ones who saw started treating me differently. Not with pity, with respect. Like I mattered. Like my pain was real. For the first time in years, I felt seen. At the next family gathering, which I attended despite Thomas's earlier suggestion that I stay away, people treated me differently. They asked how I was doing. Really asked. They listened when I spoke. When Patricia tried to interrupt, someone gently redirected the conversation back to me. I watched her face as she realized what was happening. She was losing control of the narrative. The room no longer automatically bent to her perspective. Thomas noticed too. He kept glancing between me and Patricia, confused by the shift. Kyle sat silently in the corner, no longer holding court with stories. Later, as people were leaving, Patricia's mother pulled me aside. "Michael, I didn't know it was that serious," she said quietly. Patricia made it sound like nothing. "It wasn't nothing," I said. She nodded. "I'm sorry no one protected you." Those words, simple and genuine, meant more than she could know. Because for months, I'd been made to feel like I was overreacting. Like my fear and pain were inconvenient exaggerations. But I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dramatic. I'd almost died, and the people who should have cared chose not to. The truth was finally, slowly, being recognized. And with each person who acknowledged it, I felt a little more solid. A little more real. As if I'd been disappearing and was finally becoming visible again. A month later, I met Thomas for lunch. He'd asked to see me, his voice careful on the phone. We sat across from each other at a quiet restaurant, and for a long time neither of us spoke. Finally he said, "Dad, I need to know. Have you changed your will?" I sipped my water. "Yes." His face paled. "What does that mean?" "It means I've updated my legal documents to reflect my current circumstances," I said calmly. "You were my power of attorney. You're not anymore." "Dad, that's extreme," he said. "Is it?" I asked. "You told me not to rock the boat when I almost drowned. You sided with your wife when she dismissed my pain. You've uninvited me from family events to keep her comfortable. Why would I trust you with my medical decisions?" He opened his mouth, closed it. "Who's your power of attorney now?" he asked. "My lawyer," I said. "Someone who'll follow my wishes instead of Patricia's preferences." He looked stricken. "This is because of the lake." "No," I said. "It's because of everything after the lake. The incident showed me who you've become. And it's not someone I can rely on." He stared at his plate. "What about the financial stuff?" "What about it?" I asked. "Your inheritance. Your help with things." I set down my fork. "Thomas, I've given you over $70,000 in the last 15 years. I have documentation. Not once have you acknowledged it." His face went white. 70,000? Yes. I didn't realize it was that much. "Because you never looked," I said quietly. "You just assumed I'd always be there, always help, always bend. But I'm done bending." Over the following weeks, the reality of my withdrawal became clear. Thomas called twice asking for money. I said no both times. Patricia's car needed expensive repairs. Their savings account, apparently, was nearly empty. Kyle's college fund wasn't where they thought it would be. The comfortable life they'd built was balanced on assumptions about my support. And those assumptions were collapsing. Patricia called, her voice sharp. "Michael, we need to talk about your responsibilities." "I don't have responsibilities to you," I said. "You're Thomas's father. You have obligations." "I've met my obligations," I said. "I raised him. I supported him. I helped far more than I ever had to. But I don't owe you my retirement savings." She sputtered. "You're being selfish. Family helps family." "You're right," I said. "Family helps family. Where was my family when I was drowning?" Silence. "That's different," she said finally. "No," I said. "It's exactly the same. You want support without offering any in return. That's not family. That's exploitation. She hung up. But the calls didn't stop. Texts came. Voicemails. Each one more desperate than the last. They were scrambling, trying to recover the safety net they'd never valued. But I'd already made my decision. I wasn't their backup plan anymore. 3 months after the lake incident, Patricia's mother hosted another gathering. I almost didn't go. But Helen convinced me. They need to see you're not hiding, she said. So I went. The room had a different energy this time. Conversations paused when I entered. People greeted me warmly, genuinely. Patricia stood near the kitchen, her smile tight. Halfway through the evening, someone brought up the lake. I heard Kyle's quite the swimmer now, an aunt said innocently. Before Patricia could redirect, Helen spoke up. Actually, we should talk about what happened at the lake last summer. The room went quiet. Kyle looked up from his phone, his face uncertain. Kyle pushed Michael into deep water as a prank, Helen continued. Michael struggled to breathe and nearly drowned. No one helped him. And afterward, he was told he was being dramatic. People stared. One of Thomas's cousins turned to Kyle. Is that true? Kyle's face flushed. It was just a joke. Did he look like he was joking when he couldn't breathe? The cousin pressed. Kyle's confidence cracked. I didn't think it was that serious. Because no one told you it was wrong, Helen said quietly. Did they, Kyle? He looked at his parents. Thomas stared at the floor. Patricia's mouth opened, but no words came. The room held its breath, waiting. The silence stretched. Finally, Kyle's voice came out small. I pushed him. And I laughed. And no one told me to stop. His eyes filled with tears. No one told me to apologize. Patricia moved toward him, but Helen held up a hand. Let him finish. Kyle looked at me, really looked, for the first time since that day. I heard Mom tell you to stop being dramatic. Dad didn't say anything. So I thought it was okay. I thought you were fine. His voice broke. But you weren't fine, were you? I shook my head slowly. No, Kyle. I wasn't. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm really sorry. The words, finally spoken, didn't erase anything. But they mattered. Every eye in the room turned to Patricia and Thomas. Waiting. We should have helped you, Thomas said finally, his voice rough. We should have jumped in. We should have made Kyle apologize. We should have checked if you were okay. He looked up, his eyes red. I was a coward, Dad. I'm sorry. Patricia said nothing. She stood frozen, her carefully constructed image crumbling in front of everyone. Patricia, Helen said quietly. Do you have anything to say? She looked around the room, seeing judgment in every face. I didn't think it was that serious, she said weakly. He seemed fine. He had pneumonia, someone said. He almost died, another added. Her face crumpled. But I noticed she didn't apologize. Couldn't, maybe. Because apologizing meant admitting she'd been wrong all along. Thomas called the next day. Dad, can we talk? Really talk. We met at a park, walking slowly along a path by the river. I've been thinking, he said. About all of it. The lake, the money, everything. I waited. I chose her over you, he said. Every time, I chose keeping Patricia happy over protecting you. And I can't believe I did that. He stopped walking. You almost died, and I told you to move on. What kind of son does that? A scared one, I said. He looked at me sharply. I don't deserve your understanding. No, I agreed. You don't. But I'm giving it anyway because I remember who you used to be before you disappeared into her expectations. He wiped his eyes. I want to be that person again. I want to choose you. Is it too late? I thought about it carefully. Thomas, I've changed my will. my power of attorney, my emergency contacts. Those things aren't changing back. He nodded, accepting it. But if you want to rebuild something, I continued, it starts with respect. Not obligation. Not guilt. Respect. I can do that, he said. Can you? I asked. Because the first time Patricia asks you to choose, you'll have to choose differently. He met my eyes. I will. I promise. I wanted to believe him. But promises were easy. Actions were what mattered. We'll see, I said. A week later, Patricia called. Michael, I need to say something. I waited, expecting another excuse. What happened at the lake was wrong, she said. Her voice sounded different. Smaller. I was wrong. I treated your pain like an inconvenience. I told Kyle it was fine to laugh. I made you feel like you didn't matter. I held the phone, barely breathing. I was so focused on controlling how everything looked that I didn't see what actually happened. You almost died. And instead of helping, I blamed you for ruining the weekend. She paused. I'm sorry, Michael. Really sorry. The apology sat between us. Thank you, I said finally. Does this change things? She asked. I don't know, I said honestly. Words are important. But so are actions. What do you need from me? She asked. Space, I said. Time. And proof that you mean this. She was quiet. Then, okay. I understand. After we hung up, I sat for a long time. The apology mattered. But it didn't erase months of pain. It didn't give me back the safety I'd lost. Forgiveness, I was learning, wasn't something you gave all at once. It was something you built slowly, carefully, with both people working toward it. Maybe we'd get there. Maybe we wouldn't. But for now, I had my dignity back. And that was enough. Things changed slowly after that. Kyle wrote me a letter, not a text, explaining everything he'd learned about consequences and respect. Thomas started calling weekly, just to talk, not to ask for anything. Patricia sent flowers on my birthday with a card that said simply, "Thank you for not giving up on us." They were trying. I could see it. But I also kept my boundaries firm. When they asked for money, I said no. When they planned family events, I decided each time whether I wanted to attend. When conversations got uncomfortable, I spoke up instead of shrinking. The financial support I'd given for years went instead into my own life. I took a trip I'd always wanted to take. I bought new furniture for my apartment. I spent money on myself without guilt. And slowly, something unexpected happened. They started respecting me. Not because I was useful. Not because I always said yes. But because I'd shown them I didn't need them more than I needed myself. Kyle got accepted to college on his own merit, working harder than he ever had. Thomas started paying his own bills, learning to manage without a safety net. Patricia stopped trying to control every narrative and started listening instead. They were becoming better people. Not because I'd forced them, but because I'd stopped enabling them to stay the same. A year after the lake incident, I stood on a different dock at a different lake. This one was clear and calm, the water reflecting the perfect blue sky. I'd come alone, on purpose, to face what had terrified me. I sat at the edge, feet dangling, and felt nothing but peace. The lake hadn't drowned me. It woke me up. It showed me I'd been living half a life, always bending, always accommodating, always shrinking to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold me. But I wasn't that person anymore. I'd learned something powerful in the year since that day. Respect isn't something you beg for. It's something you require. Dignity isn't given. It's chosen. And family, real family, doesn't ask you to drown quietly so they can stay comfortable. I still saw Thomas, Kyle, and Patricia. But on my terms. With boundaries they'd learned to respect. They'd lost their safety net, their free help, their silent supporter. But if they were lucky, if they kept working, they might gain something better. A real relationship. One built on honesty instead of obligation. The sun warmed my face. The water lapped gently against the dock. And for the first time in years, I felt completely, entirely free. The lake didn't break me. It saved me. And I was never going back to drowning again.